professional athlete and you just get deals landed on your lap. It's really
the following with the younger players is getting bigger. Sort of age groups, they've got huge following. They're making big moves. They're earning a lot of money. And is that a worry? Maybe.
I want a boot deal now.
Yeah.
And that is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Like, as long as you
generation of player, I don't know what comes next because.
Okay, welcome back to another episode. I'm joined today with obviously Jason Mack and our lovely Rebecca James from Limitless Sports Consultancy. Today's going to be a fascinating insight into what Rebecca does and coincide with what Jason does, and it's going to be really, really interesting what they've both got to say. So Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. And I want to talk about Limitless and what place it has in the football industry.
Thank you for having me. So Limitless basically was an idea that I come up with because I was working in football for a long time. I was working at clubs and I realised that there wasn't many agencies or consultants on the outside that understood the pressures and the demands for athletes from a club and country perspective, but also took that into the holistic side of support with their personal stuff. So we're basically an agency or a consultancy that supports elite athletes with all of their communication, comms, brand image, commercial side of things. And what we try and do is bring all of that demand together to look after them properly, be able to make them more commercially viable, but also protect them from a lot of the pressure in the industry as well.
Wow. And so, I mean, Jason, let me come to you. You've been obviously working in this industry for 16 plus years now. Have you seen a big change over the past decades with sports brands wanting to partner up with individuals rather than the teams themselves, or has that always been the case?
Yes, I've seen a shift recently in the last sort of maybe 10 years. It's funny actually, I was actually having this conversation with my old man who you know. My old man was the first agent 45 years ago and he famously had the shirt of Terry Butcher. Don't know if you remember when he had blood around the thing, and he took that off, he went down to the changing room and went and got it, and we was having a conversation. If that was now, you can only imagine sort of what you could do with that sort of thing, which is where I've seen a big shift. I think that would now be a big focus, whereas what I've seen in the last sort of 10 plus years is a real big support network around, i.e. Rebecca and what they do, and a lot of help. But I would say when I first started, there wasn't lots of help. But what's great about the industry now is there is lots of people like Rebecca that are able to, you know, you're able to lean on, and especially for me being an independent agency, you definitely need support around you. So yeah, I have seen a big shift.
So let's go to the process of securing brand partnerships for professional footballers. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of that?
Yeah, so everyone's so different. You know, when you think of elite athletes, they can be at the start of their career, they can be near the end of their career, any point in between. Depends on what country they play in, what team they play for, and what league they play in, what national team they represent. So you have to take in all of that into consideration, and then also their personal interests, who they are as an individual, you know, as to their friends. How do they see them? How do they want to be perceived by the external sort of fans and media as well? So you take all of that into consideration, and then you target specific commercial sort of core areas where you want to maybe research, explore, try and find where there might be spaces that they would fit in well. And then you sometimes proactively reach out to brands and say, look, they're a big fan of your brand, or they're really interested in this. We'd love to do a collaboration, and then start the conversations from there. Sometimes it's inbound, and brands want to work with a specific athlete or a specific type of person, and they'll reach out and say, have you got anyone that suits, you know, this type of profile? This is the project that we're working on. So it can come through a lot of different avenues, but the key thing for me is that it always aligns to the players' values, and it's not just footballers, but we're focused on that today, but any athlete. Because if you try and put them in a space that doesn't suit them, the brand partnership doesn't work eventually. So it's really important that the values of that brand match the values of that individual personally.
Do you think a player can suit to the brand, as in, like a lot of players sort of depend on the personality of a player or whatever? For me, some players are obviously suited to certain brands, which is natural what you see, but do you think the modern players are a lot better from your experience? You know, sort of my experience from the past, players were clueless about how branding works and all that sort of thing. And obviously that's part of your job to teach them, but do you think some players just have that natural ability to be able to suit to any brand? Because I don't see it that often.
Yes, I wouldn't say there's many athletes that suit most brands, because when you think of different brands and how they operate, even down to how they advertise or what their target market is, it's very difficult to get an athlete that actually fits in that area really well. So I think when this all started to become popular, as in athletes getting these brand deals, obviously David Beckham was like the key figure that changed all of this. He was amazing.
He was,
because everyone loved him. I know he had a lot of issues as well for his career, but in terms of, he looked good, he was a nice guy, he was a great footballer, like, so everyone wanted to work with him. Whereas I think now brands and athletes are more specific with what they want. So you have to really target it more now, I'd say. Whereas previously, just all the big brands wanted to work with all the big athletes. But now I think as time has gone on and we've got more targeted marketing, especially with social media and the way that's changed things, they have to be more considerate with who they work with. So it's actually not as easy as people think for athletes to get these brand deals now.
Yeah, of course.
I think people think that you're a professional athlete and you just get deals landed on your lap, but it's really not the case.
A question that I've got as well is like, with the clubs themselves, do they have any outside influence on the decision that's made with the individual and their brand?
Yes, the answer is yes, but depending on the club and depending on if you've got an image rights agreement with the club or not. So they will, if you have got an image rights agreement with the club as part of your football contract, which is more than me, that's your side of things, but that will affect more how much control and how much say-so they have with what commercial brands you're working with or what media work you're doing personally.
Well, that's really interesting. A question that I really want to ask you is about the famous scene at the Euro 2020, I think it was Budapest, I think, from memory, when Cristiano Ronaldo famously moved the Coca-Cola bottles out the way and then brought in water bottles. Was that a PR stunt, or was that to protect his brand partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had this conversation with Ronaldo, obviously. So I wouldn't like to say for sure, but for me, he's very smart. He's been in the industry a long time. So obviously he knows that that moment would be a bit of a viral moment. So there's probably a PR element to it. But also we know that Ronaldo is, he's got to where he has and the longevity of his career because he's so structured on his fitness and his 1% margins. So actually the high performance side of him probably wouldn't want to sit in front of Coca-Cola. He would never drink Coca-Cola in his life. So I think it was a bit of both. I don't think it aligned with him and I don't think he wanted to be represented with that brand. And now we're seeing that the younger athletes actually don't want to be aligned to brands like that. It's quite rare where anything that's, an alcohol brand, betting company, anything like that, a lot of them just do not want to touch it because they know that they have a responsibility globally for the younger generation as well. And they don't want to be seen to be making that popular.
Wow.
So I think there was a genuine part of him as well that probably looked at that and thought, I don't want all these millions of young children all over the world thinking that drinking loads of Coke is a great idea, because it's not. So yeah, it happened quickly, but I think that would have all built up. I don't know if you feel the same, but...
Yeah, it's funny, I was actually going to ask you a question based on that, especially around a younger generation, because I've seen a big change in the modern young players versus obviously the old school type, let's say, because especially everyone navigates towards the Premier League. Do you think that you're going to see kind of more brands getting around younger players? Because I'm noticing, especially the following with the younger players is getting bigger. A lot of players are moving within England since Brexit and that sort of thing. I'm noticing that the younger lads, and I'm talking sort of 15, 16, 17, these sort of age groups, they've got huge following, they're making big moves, they're earning a lot of money, and maybe brands will navigate towards that, because obviously you've got the global icons that, they kind of sell themselves, but especially with the younger generation of people that are following these lads, do you think you'll see a shift in the market?
Yeah, I think so. And sadly, I think that's largely because of social media.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you say, they've got a lot of following because they're hyped up from a young age. And then media and fans are sort of onto them at a young age. So then their social following rises really quickly, and brands look at that as an amazing marketing opportunity.
Is that a worry, maybe? I don't.
It's a little bit for me because I'm so passionate about the holistic and sort of well-being side of things for athletes. I do really worry for the future of the young athletes because they're put under such scrutiny now from a young age. As soon as they come through that academy ranks, as you know, people start talking about them. Social media engagement increases. So does the abuse on social media. as soon as you increase your following, the more abuse you get. As soon as you get exposure to a first team, the more abuse you get. So then when you throw in commercial demands as well, when really you've got a lot just to make sure that your body is functioning to the highest that you can to be able to play your best football, to be able to get your best football deals, and then you throw in a load of commercial demand, it can be quite detrimental.
To the long term, as in they should be just concentrating on your football, and naturally clubs don't like it, do they? Managers certainly don't like it. You know, they don't want that. So this kind of managing that kind of
balance,
getting the balance right.
And I don't know if you find it, but I feel like a lot of young players, they'll go to their agent or someone like me and say, "I want a boot deal now."
Yeah.
And there's this weird perception that if you're a decent footballer, you have a boot deal, and that is bonkers, absolutely bonkers. Like, as long as you've got boots that suit your feet, that are allowing you to play football properly, there shouldn't be this demand and like pressure that you have a boot deal. And a lot of the boot sponsors now, haven't they? They've moved away from sponsoring athletes individually.
They have, and that's been the brutality of the game that I live in terms of the sort of, that's what you have to try and focus on, whether you're going to land a boot deal for a player or land a brand that wants to be around a player. But, you know, for us, we have to offer that, whether it's us getting them individually or pushing a brand towards them. But, you know, and especially with the let's say the new market with Skechers coming into it, and you know, and that sort of thing, Under Armour having a good go, as we know. I'm just noticing that kind of new generation of player. I don't know what comes next, because for me, or well, yourself as well, obviously working together, what you do is try and manage that with a young player. And that was one of the questions I had. You know, working together with a young player is quite difficult because they want to build a brand early. What advice would you give for a really young player, whether they're 14, 15, 16, because they're getting all of this attention, and ultimately that, you know, they only get one career, let's not forget, so they do have to try and maximise it. I know the clubs don't like it, but if it's going to just happen, you can't ignore it, can you? So for me, it's like, is there a different bit of advice you could give to a younger player than maybe, say, let's say, a player that you've worked with for years who just knows what to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're pre-first pro contract, I'm really, really strict on this is pure education.
Got it.
I'm not putting you in front of cameras, commercial deals. Like, that's my personal approach with it. I'll educate you to be able to handle this side of the business, which is just part and parcel now, isn't it? If you sign a football contract, you're signing to say that you'll deliver all the commercial stuff and all of the broadcast rights as well. So that's my approach of it. Until you get your first pro deal, it's pure education and preparing you, which can only help you be more resilient in that space anyway, and hopefully make you more successful because you're prepared for it. Then once you've got the pro deal, I still think you're fighting for that place, aren't you? And you're still fighting for that low move or whatever that might be. Until you've got that football experience, you have to be really mindful not to be doing too much else. Of course, if you've got interests, you're passionate about things. I've got a couple of really young players that are massively into sustainability, and they're going to be game changers. They're going to be forced to be reckoned with. But again, at the moment, they're still trying to prove their place to get where they need to be football-wise. Yeah. So it's been the person in the room to not, you know, egg them on all the time and say, let's just take it easy, bit by bit. When you get that moment in your football career, then we'll look at amplifying this for you. We'll help you share. We'll help you articulate how much you care about that. But for now, let's just talk about your football. Yeah. Or just do your football. Just let your feet do the talking. Yeah.
And in my experience, that would mean that clubs will want to work with you, because obviously there's some people that just want to do business or whatever, but the fact that you've got that approach is going to mean that not only agents are going to want to work with you, but clubs, because that you fit their narrative, which is great.
I think so. But, you know, a lot of people don't understand the pressure that clubs are under as well. So obviously I know no one's perfect, no club's perfect, but I've been lucky enough to work at some good clubs where they actually take care of their young players. Yeah. And I learned quite early on that actually there's a reason why there's a high percentage of athletes that go on to play at a high level, and that's because they're getting the right support. So they're well prepared for the industry. So wherever they go, abroad, wherever it might be, they've got more resilience and more understanding of all of these things to balance out their football versus all of the other contractual stuff that they need to do and the proactive things that, you know, they enjoy. And actually the better relationship you can have, right, with the club, the national team, agent, everyone that's in that player's team and circle, everyone's on.
It's normally when you get the best out of
in alignment, yeah. So that has to be the best way to move. Of course, not everyone does that.
No.
But it makes sense for the athlete. If you're really caring about that individual, having everyone on the same, singing from the same hymn sheet is going to be more beneficial. So hopefully more young players are just understanding it more and not running away with it, but just being educated.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Going to obviously the Euros now, without naming names, you represent some very high-profile players, of which a couple have starred obviously in the Euros, as I just said, that have had really, really good games. Do you get inundated with DMs and brands jumping on a player based on the amazing Euros that they've had, for instance?
Actually, no.
Really?
Yeah, you'll have a spike in interest and a little bit of inbound opportunity. But I think a lot of the time brands don't know how to activate with athletes at that level, or they're not sure how to fit them into their marketing plans or strategies. So you'll be surprised it's not as much of a huge sort of interest as you'd expect. Media-wise, yes.
Right.
So everyone will want to have some, off guidance understanding as to how things are going and, how they might be playing that well or how they're feeling. And there'll be a lot of media interest. But from brands, there'll be a little bit extra, but nothing crazy that you'd expect. But again, I think that's because they're operating in a way where their brands are so specific. Everyone on the outside can see that.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get totally random brands flying in.
Of course.
So yeah, it's probably not as I said earlier, it's not as easy as people think to just take on loads of commercial opportunities. But at the same time, I do think that's a good thing because you're more specific with what you're doing. You're careful with what brands you're aligning yourself to, especially when you're playing at that level where you've got so much to lose. If you do go into the wrong thing, you have to be really mindful. But yeah, it was a great tournament for them individually, and I think that will benefit long term. So they'll see that sort of the media interest, the fan sentiment, and the commercial viability that they have from that will benefit them over the coming months.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that happens mid-tournament, ever.
Right. Really interesting. I know you touched upon it earlier, Jason, about for younger players, but what advice do you have for professional footballers that are looking to secure brand partnerships and maximising their earning potential off the field?
So like later on, as in like near to retirement.
Yeah.
It's tricky when you're near to retirement. I think a lot of athletes feel that they wish they'd have made the most of this earlier on. You get to a point in your career, again, I'd love your insight on this, but more when you're signing what you think might be one of your last deals.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I wish I'd have taken more interest in the media side of things. I wish I'd have taken more interest in the commercial side of things. I wish I'd understood it, because now I've only got really this last opportunity from a football perspective, and that's not always the most glamorous role when you're coming to retirement. So I think it all depends on what they've achieved, what sort of character they are, and what their post-career ambitions are. A lot of players, that they want to go into broadcast, don't they? They want to become a coach. So what I try and do, no matter what part in their career they're at, is have a really honest conversation with, what do you want after this? Because we can tailor everything that we do towards that. So it helps open those doors for you. You've got to put in your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, if you've got an athlete that, I don't want to name names, but someone that I worked with for a long time, he basically turned his whole career around image-wise. And we did a great job, and it's amazing how rewarding that is for me as well, to see that full circle moment. But I knew that he wanted to become a coach at the end of his career. So I said, this is an absolute non-negotiable for you, that you put this work in and you understand that not everyone's out here to hate you, but we need to get people to understand who you are and how you've got to this point, and then they'll be more on board with you. And then we'll start talking about the fact that you're doing your coaching licenses and that you have this interest in the tactical side of the game and actually how knowledgeable and, he's very, very wise in that space. And then gradually the narrative shifted. Now everyone's so excited for him to retire because they want to see where he goes to coach. So the doors are already opening. People already want him to coach their sides. And athletes now will go to him and be like, what do you think about this? What about this moment? Like, they'll actually get his coaching advice, he's still playing at the top level. But if you don't speak about it, no one knows that you're interested in it. It doesn't mean that you take your eye off the ball in your playing career, but it just gradually shifts that narrative so that when you come to retirement, same with brand deals, don't take on any brand deals that are going to cause you issues when you retire and you become a coach. Or if you want to get into more broadcast work, do more broadcast work then. Get the experience, get the comfortability with it, and basically get to the point where when you retire, broadcasters want to offer you a job because they can see that in you. So yeah, it's all tailored to the person, but I don't know how you feel with that kind of last contract phase. It puts a lot of pressure on you as well, doesn't it? And like everyone around, because they're like all of a sudden, okay, I wish I'd have done all of this, can you help me?
Yeah, I think it was one of the reasons why I asked you the question about the youngsters, because I'm just noticing that, the retirement age, let's say, is 35 in a contract. It's not 35 anymore, really. You're looking at players at 30 years old now, aren't you? So for me, if you're not building a narrative early, you might miss the opportunity for me. So I've seen lots of players that have really want to go into punditry or whatever, and they can't because you have to be a certain type of person or whatever. So I've seen it on the other side where there's a lot of coaches that aren't actually able to get jobs, and I suppose you can sit down with them at 18, 19, 20 and try and teach them through that, but you've then got the flip side, which is, well, you should be concentrating on your football or whatever. And that's why I was asking the question, because I think it's a bit of a catch-22 for me, because they should know to sort of learn early about branding, how you're going to, finish your career, start your career, midway through your career, versus the clubs being unhappy with you not wanting to do it. Yeah. Really, the agents want them sitting at home because, it's meant to be a boring life, let's say, as a footballer. But then again, on the flip side, you're meant to be out there. So I think it's really, really difficult. And, to manage that through a situation, it's then all about time. I do think players have time. So I do think they should be focusing on things early, which is why I think there's going to be a shift in the market where younger players are going to get involved in a lot more brand consulting and that sort of thing for me, because I think you're going to see 28, 29, 30 years old really soon, because of just where, if you looked at the age bracket, normally to come through as a young player, the average age I think was 21, 22. I don't know what the stat is now, but it's definitely not 22 anymore. It's going to be a lot younger. So if you're thinking your last contract is going to be at 30, you're 1 year rolling, aren't you? Normally that's most clubs' structure. You're not getting a 4-year deal at 33, are you? So for me, you are having to think about it when you sign your 5-6 year deal. Now, we all know what Chelsea have been doing with 7-8 year contracts or whatever it might look like. What you're going to do through that period, how you're going to renegotiate and that. So it's a really tough question to answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going. I'm not sure. I just think it's getting younger.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right with those really long deals. When you're playing at the highest level and you're signing a 5, 6, 7 year deal, it's like, I can sit back now and relax. Right. I've got a good income. I'm at a good club.
Stability.
Whatever happens, I've got stability. I can sit back. And actually, that's probably the worst thing you can do, because before you know it, 3-4 seasons have gone by. No one knows who you are. You've got no protection around you. If things start to go poorly on the pitch, you've got all of the media, the fans piling in, and you've got no personal brand. So no one has that, empathy towards you or, human touch to it. Yeah. So you don't have that protection. You then get just pushed out of the club, go abroad, and again, no one knows. There's no amplification on your statistics and why you were given that big contract at 22. So it's really important, more important than they realise, I think, that actually you've got players that sort of fight for a contract sort of year on year, haven't you? And maybe more challenging for you guys, because it's like, okay, well, each season or each couple of seasons, you've got to try and find the right place for them. But actually for like the longevity of their well-being and the post-career stuff, it's the guys that sign the really long contracts that need to be even more mindful that they're not just sat back and like resting on their laurels. So yeah, it's all about education, and some people will listen and take it on board and will, be really proactive, and others just won't want to hear it until they're at a certain point in their career. And
that's right, and that might be too late.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I think that's a really lovely ending on that. It's been absolutely fascinating. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. I know Jason and I are very grateful for your time. And amazing insight. And that leaves me nothing more to say, but thanks very much for watching. Give Rebecca James a follow on Instagram account. We'll pop that right somewhere here. And for for Jason's account, YouTube account, please consider subscribing, and it will mean the world to us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.